Welcome everyone, thank you for coming. My name is Jaira. I'm currently studying in Leiden University, where I'm specializing in the development of South and Southeast Asia. That is also what I'm doing besides my college. In countries where I grew up, first world countries like Holland, education is seen as something that is really self-evident. All people went to school, all people go to college, and that is really different in other countries like India. In India, education is still seen as a privilege, which means that education is only for people who are from higher castes, from higher social statuses, and from wealthier backgrounds. That is something that we can't even imagine what it's like. Still, many people are deprived of education, and I take India as an example of it because it's a society, a country where 25% is illiterate, and 25% of the world's poorest live in India. So that means that about 70 million people live in absolute poverty. And you would think, like, what can students, or can a student like me do about that? Well, I started by brainstorming while I was traveling there. Because education there is, like I said, a privilege. So I wanted to give access to education for all sections of society, but then start on a small skilled level. Education is the basic condition for humans to develop themselves, to find their innate potentials, and to discover their talents, of which they were lacking before. If people are deprived of education, they are deprived of the opportunity to develop themselves and to be part of the market, part of the economy, part of the whole globalization process. And the most important point of this talk is that education can really have an impact on ending the intergenerational cycle of poverty. So it can really help to break the cycle of poverty where so many people are still in. I will now tell something about how I got enrolled in this whole process. I came to India for the first time in 2016 in the summer, and I was just traveling there with my mom, and then we encountered some children who were begging on the streets. And they were asking us for food, and they were inviting us to their homes. And I came to their homes because I wanted to see what they lived like and what got them in this situation that forced them to go begging for food or for basic primary life needs. And I encountered some kind of tent camp with about 50 families who are all living in this kind of circumstances. So they're all living in inhuman circumstances, suffering from really low living standards. They don't even have waterproof shelter, no water, no clothes, no income. And what the main cause of that is, in my opinion, is the lack of education. Oh, sorry. And all these people, they belong to the same caste. So that is really typical for India. They all belong to the caste which consists of musicians. So they're all playing drum for a living, and none of the adults ever went to school. So this would be the first generation to trigger change. Here you can see how these people live and how they are in this cycle of poverty. So I brainstormed with the families, and then I came up with a project or with an idea, but I was a 20-year-old student, so I was thinking, what can I do to help? Because I don't have that much sources, that much power, or yes, like that much impact that I can make. That's what I thought. I started with focusing on three main factors, and in my experience, those are the three factors to help breaking the cycle of poverty. The first one is, of course, education. So I started with sending children to school. They all belong to the same community, but still, I started with one child. I sent him to school, and he was the first one of this entire community, of this entire generation. So up to now, I have 21 kids who are enrolled in a local school. So I decided to work together with local education as well, because we can really improve the local quality of education and the formation of human capital from the outside. After school, these children are also tutored by a private teacher in my own project, which is a project center. So they're all lacking of support from home for education. So that's why they really need after-school programs to help them with their homework and to just teach them basic knowledge. Besides that, I employ the parents, so they have income of which they were lacking before, and we're also providing basic life needs for the families. So they get monthly food, they get waterproof shelter, gas stoves, or basic things like food, clothes, and yeah, everything of which they were lacking before. Here you can see the children, and I think their faces really clearly show the effect that education has on them. They're all super happy to go to school. The youngest is 3, the oldest is 16, so we have a diverse group of all different levels of knowledge, different ages. And this is really the first generation that will trigger change. So it's all in their hands, but they're also really happy to have this chance. And here you can see that after school they're also really educated by our teacher. So like I said, this is the first generation that goes to school. And what this changed, it also has a direct impact on their lives right now. Not even for future generations, but also for now, it has just completely transformed their lives. Because so many children grow up in poverty, they grow up begging on the streets, they sleep outside, and they never interact with people from outside their community or outside their caste, like in India's case. So what this did, like sending children to school is such a basic thing for us, but it really removed children from the streets and it really gives them a better life. And what it also does, education can really combat inequality, of which India is a clear example. They have caste inequality and gender inequality. So it can really eradicate those hierarchies in the society. So what it does, we send girls and boys to school, so it also can really tackle child rights violations like child labor, child marriages, child trafficking even. So education really helps them to find their inner talents, inner potentials, and hopefully break this cycle of poverty that they're in for the future generations as well. My future plans and goals are, of course, to enroll more children in school, maybe start in this place, in the Pushkar city where I started, but maybe even expand it to more communities in India or outside India even, and maybe even focus on higher education as well, secondary education, and eventually help them to find jobs. And what also a future plan of mine is to focus on the internet, because of course we're living in this digital age, so we can really use the internet to kind of transfer knowledge from here, or from people who are skilled, who are talented, to remote areas like this area. So we can educate teachers to increase their quality of education and maybe teach, for example, English to children there. So what this journey has really taught me is that education is here so self-evident, but the first day that I came there, I felt the urge to just do something, because we are all so blessed here with so many options, freedom, sources, and even power. So yeah, that is what that really stroked me. And in my opinion, the more inclusive the reach of education is, the more likely it is that even the poorest of the poorest will have the chance to overcome poverty.